Hi, my name is Kelsey McFall. I'm a part of the Ethiopian Diaspora Stories Project. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing EDSP co-founders Frew and Trudy Carrot Ward about their founding and their vision for EDSP.
Frew, can you tell us a little bit about you and how you came to America?
I was born in Ethiopia. I had a normal childhood until the time of the 1974 revolution.
The present crisis with a mutiny that forced out the old prime minister.
These are the moments when Ethiopia's kingdom came to an end. In February 1974, the Ethiopian military rose up in revolt. By September, they deposed the Emperor Haile Selassie. It was a coup that brought to an end one of the world's oldest continuous kingdoms.
Gave it its first written constitution. Realizing that times must change, he has decreed constitutional reforms be made, apparently with a view toward making Ethiopia a constitution.
Haile Selassie was the last emperor of a dynasty that claimed it could trace its roots back thousands of years.
And orderly.
At the time, I was a junior in high school. Like thousands of high school and college students living in the capital city, I was excited by the possibilities of change for the mass of the people and what the revolution represented. As time went on, the revolution was hijacked from us. The military took over, led by Mengistu Haile Mariam. Many idealistic members of the student body were actually massacred, and some were imprisoned, some left the country, some went actually to join a guerrilla force to fight to bring about a more democratic government. Some, like myself, ended up fleeing the country. As a matter of fact, I was in prison before I left. I was in prison a year and a half, and when I got released, I fled to neighboring Djibouti. It took me 6 days and nights to make it over to Djibouti. From the Republic of Djibouti, I was able to come to the United States of America in September of 1980. As I was coming through customs, a work permit was issued, and then later my green card was sent to me in the mail. I was received by my stepmother and her sisters, my aunts, who at the time were living in the Washington, D.C. area, suburban area in Silver Spring, Maryland, off of East-West Highway. My group was the first mass migrants to come from Africa for the first time because of the 1980 Refugee Act. At the time, I believe the year I came in 1980, there were 3,500 immigrants from Ethiopia that came in from Somalia, Kenya, and Sudan and Djibouti altogether. Consequently, the next year, that number swelled to about 6,000. The year after that, number went up to about 6,500. Now, you could see the large number of Ethiopian immigrants that called America home. And then you could also look at the refugee crisis all over the world. That, by some estimate, I heard the latest number is about 65 million refugees out there in the world today. That's a figure large enough I couldn't even get my head to wrap around my head around that number.
What was your first job when you came to the States?
My first job coming to America, 8 days in America. My Aunt Roman she was working at the time, she was working at DuPont Plaza Hotel in Washington, D.C., and she talked to the supervisor, the housekeeping supervisor, and she got him to, having me come over and do an interview, and I was hired on the spot. My job was vacuuming floors. At times I was doing 16 rooms, and she was a cashier at that time. She and I were living together on East-West Highway just outside of Washington, D.C. in the apartment in Silver Spring. I remember early morning, we'd start walking to the subway station in Silver Spring, and then from there we'll take the BART to DuPont Circle. I remember it being cold. The first winter that I experienced, I was in December, and for me coming from Djibouti, which was an inferno, that was totally a different experience. I was feeling cold, very cold. And I won't forget that experience. A month later, I got another job at Ziff Davis Publishing Company, which was located just a few blocks from the Washington Post building on 15th Street. A friend of the family, Siyum Ragasa, he was able to talk to the supervisor again, and then I got hired as a mailman. Later, when I got my driver's license, I got another part-time job at the Hyatt Regency Hotel across from the Capitol building. And I became a parking lot attendant there.
Can you talk about college and your journey to US citizenship?
By January of 1981, I've already enrolled myself at the University of District Columbia. And I was taking classes only Tuesdays and Thursdays, morning hours to about 3 p.m. At the same time, during that time, I leased an apartment on 15 in Rhode Island, and I became independent. I was living in Maryland. Now I'm living right over here on 15th Street, across from Holiday Inn, 15 in Rhode Island. I believe there were like 20 or more Ethiopians that were living at that apartment. I had a studio apartment. The rent was like $300. In today's real estate market, if you go to DC, that probably will be upwards of $1,000. In August of 1986, I graduated from the University of District Columbia in business management. And just a month before that, in July 1986, July 3rd, 1986, I believe, I became a naturalized United States citizen. The significance of this is the fact that at that time, the number of Ethiopians that live over there in America in general, in the DMV area, their numbers were, gradually increasing, but nobody hardly thought about becoming a United States citizen. It was, I was looked at as a traitor, unpatriotic, because our lives were considered like transitional. We were only here. Our life's purpose was to, go to school, and we socialized heavily with each other during the weekends. And when the country gets better, if our country gets better, we're going to all get our education and go back home. But as time went on, that reality, set in, and most people, start. It's like we're here now, and then the population start to age. That's when a lot of them start becoming United States citizens. Prior to that, that was not the case. That has changed a lot by now.
When did you come to California?
In 1989, I left the DC area and I was seeking a better pasture. Prior to that, a year before, I came to visit around Christmas time, and I fell in love with California. I said, I'm going to come and live here. And I packed my 2 suitcases, and here I am in 1989. And I've been living here in California since that time, some 26 years. I met my wife. We're working in for the same company. In 1998, we got married. The next year we had my son. We have an addition to our family. My son Paris was born, and our family grew to 5, including my 2 stepchildren from my wife's previous marriage.
Frew, have you been back to Ethiopia since you left?
Yes. In November of 2006, I decided to visit Ethiopia. 28 years since I left my own country. And I decided to bring along my firstborn, Paris, with me. He was 7 at the time. Yeah, we flew Ethiopian Airlines, and the route had to stop in Rome. There was an Ethiopian classical music playing. I thought we landed in Ethiopia. And all of a sudden, here I am sobbing like a little baby, uncontrollable, my chest up and down heaving. And my son got alarmed, and he asked, Dad, are you all right? And I told him, I'll be okay. I had to let it out. That was, I didn't expect this to happen. The impact that it had on me, your birthplace. I must have pushed all these memories and emotions, suppressed them all this time. It had a hold on me, even when it wasn't perfect. It was powerful and dramatic. All these memories that were buried deep inside my soul were coming out. And the emotion was uncontrollable. I think places where meaning, relationship, unconditional love, all intersect to create an aura of safety and belonging. And that experience right there, what I had at the airport, inside the plane, will tell you how much I was not in control. Returning to Ethiopia was the ultimate trophy that I survived the Red Terror and the Civil War, and by the grace of God and sheer coincidence. I'm sure there were so many intelligent, gifted, smart people who were more deserving to live than I, and their life was cut short. For me to walk the streets of Addis Ababa to visit families of my friends, it was unreal, and I was in cloud nine. One of the important things I did was visit my father's grave, his burial site. The last time I saw my father, he was at the main prison in Addis Ababa, Kircheli. He and I were in that same prison for over a year until I got released. This was one of the closures I had to tend to when I went back. While in Ethiopia, we traveled extensively. The whole experience was surreal for me, as I never thought I would ever return back to my home country. I even rode off Ethiopia at some point in my life. We also visited schools where I sponsored Tigist, a young girl from Addis Ababa, who was the same age as my son, through a program run by COEF, Children of Ethiopian Education Fund. Norm Perdue and his wife Ruth were the founders who introduced me to this program.
In what way did your first visit back to Ethiopia impact your life?
I think returning back to Ethiopia, it kind of brought some balance in my life, and it was a healing process for me. It was a healing process, and immediately what I did was immediately when I got back, my son and I were featured in the local paper, engaging the community in collecting used books and sponsoring girls' education in Ethiopia. We're busy in collecting books and holding fundraisers in collaboration with the students from the Tracy Unified School District. That experience led into me becoming a volunteer board member for Ethiopia Reads in early 2009, which was January.
What led you to establish Ethiopian Diaspora Stories Project?
The experience I had as a board member with Ethiopia Reads encouraged me further to pursue yet another venture and to establish the Ethiopian Diaspora Story Project as a nonprofit organization in honor of the victims and their families who paid the ultimate price, sacrifice in the fight for democracy, justice, rule of law during the civil war in Ethiopia. This has always been in my heart. There's not a day that go by that I don't think about the people whose lives were cut short, my friends. And I always think about them. I survived, and now it's almost 40 years. And what have I done to remember, these friends of mine who were more deserving to live? And I thought I wanted to do something and to witness what happened. I wanted to tell that story.
What are some of the objectives of EDSP?
EDSP, or Ethiopian Diaspora Story Project, has multiple objectives, and we list so many of them. But to me, one of the things that's not talked about is the fact that I want to, on behalf of the Ethiopian immigrants, I want to be able to express my gratitude for the international community, for the role they played in resettling in America. They were a bridge that allow us to come to America and settle in America and to start a new life fresh. United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the International Catholic Relief Services, these are the kind of organizations that actually were at the forefront at the time when, this was in 1980, at the time when the Iran hostage crisis was raging, and when the war in Afghanistan was raging, the Russians were out there, and the Americans were also getting in that war. Who would have thought, to do such a rescue operation? And I thought this was incredible. And this is what makes America one of the greatest nations on earth. Not the military might, but the compassion to reach out humanity at a time of great need. And the US Congress, through passing a legislation that's favorable to us, the 1980 Immigration Act, that allow us to come out here and get the provisions that we need in this country. The governments of Canada, the United States, Djibouti, Sudan, Somalia, all these countries, they were the host country that allowed us to stay in their country at the time of great need. Ethiopia was in crisis at that time, and people were fleeing left and right in every direction. So when I look at Sudan, Nairobi, Mogadishu, Somalia, and Djibouti, what they've done, even though it was not a lot of support, but at the same time, just the fact that they allow us to come into their country, I think that need to be recognized. Ours is, I think, a success story, immigrant success story, which you don't hear a whole lot about. So I want this story to be told. I want to express our gratitude for the international community, what they've done on our behalf, on the behalf of the refugees. The other thing I wanted to do is, as a prisoner survivor who has been through the Civil War and the Red Terror and the massacre in the 70s, I feel like I have a responsibility to bear witness for the dead and the living. The world might want to forget what happened after the aftermath of the 1974 revolution, but the families of the dead and the survivors will never forget the sacrifice made in the struggle to bring about a more just and more equitable system in Ethiopia. And this has to be honored. And this is a project that wants to honor the lives of, the dead and the families that sacrificed a whole lot. It was Simon Wiesenthal who said, "Hope lives when people remember." We have to be willing to witness and tell our survival stories for the future of humanity. And there was one other Jew survivor. It was Elie Wiesel who said, "To forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time. For in the end, it's all about memory, its sources and its magnitude, and of course, its consequences at the end." So that, when I read the book at night, that really hit me, and I said, we had to do something. So this is one of the reasons why, this project is essential. The other reason is, as the population ages, my group, my contemporaries, as we age, these stories will be lost forever. So there is certain urgency at this time to go out there and collect and preserve the stories, by as many people as fast as possible. So there's that urgency. If what happened, the story of the Holocaust was effective in telling the stories of 11 million Jews being killed, the Ethiopian Diaspora Stories Project will also have similar effect, similar impact in mitigating genocide and massacres in our part of the world, if told effectively. So I believe this story has to be told. Many of my generation, people that survived this terrible time in Ethiopia, we should be able to witness and be able to tell the stories and pass on to the next generation.
The vision of the Ethiopian Diaspora Stories Project is to create a broader understanding of the root causes of migration through the stories of the Ethiopian diaspora, to preserve the memories of the victims as well as the cultural, and history of the period and to work towards an enlightened path where all human rights are respected, where all citizens of the country live with the utmost respect for each other, with their dignity intact, without fear of violence, persecution, crushing poverty, injustice, or humiliation.